Investors are betting on a weaker consumer. The most shorted stocks on the S&P 500, as highlighted by B of A, are concentrated in the consumer discretionary sector. But headline inflation has fallen recently on supply chains, commodities, and goods prices. Our next guest says that's giving purchasing power back to consumers. We want to bring back in Ben Laidler, eToro Global Market Strategist, for some thoughts on this. So, Ben, where does the consumer stand right now? Is the strength there?
I think the consumer's in good shape. You know, we're printing 300,000 new jobs every month. We have unemployment near record lows. We've now got wage growth running ahead of headline inflation. We still haven't spent down all the pandemic savings. So I think the consumer's in pretty good shape. They are spending, though, on different things. You know, they're spending less on goods, they're spending more on services, they're spending less proportionally online, they're spending more in physical stores. There's a lot going on under the surface, but I think the consumer is in very good shape. And, you know, these lower inflation numbers are giving the consumer some purchasing power back. You know, with Amazon Prime Day next week. So that's going to be a big data point to sort of see where we are in that, in this trajectory. But, you know, the consumer dominates the U.S. economy. So if the consumer's healthy, the economy is not going into recession.
Even Prime Day will be a good, give us a better sense of how the consumer is holding up. But what about some of the worrisome signs that we have seen in just the last 24 hours? We had Levi reporting a pretty weak quarter, weak guidance that's dominating that stock's move this morning ahead of the open. And then also we had the disappointing numbers from Costco, their June sales coming in below expectations. That isn't a bit of a red flag to you?
The consumer's definitely going to slow from here. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. The question is just how much. And I see it as fairly modest. I see the consumer as pretty resilient. But also, I think a lot of the things you mentioned are more about what is the consumer choosing to spend their money on. If we don't have enough jeans at this point, having lived through the pandemic and, shop from home for then who knows? We're spending more on services. We're spending less on goods. I mean, goods market, manufacturing is in a recession already. It's services that's really holding the economy up. And so I think the consumer's in good shape, but we're definitely spending it on different things. This again, I think, Prime Day next week, which is obviously focused on online. They sell a lot of consumer electronics. They sell a lot of apparel. These segments that have been reasonably weak so far this year. I think that's what we really need to sort of, focus on, and that'll be the sort of health check for the consumer.
Well, Ben, the morning brief today was titled "Investors Waiting for a Consumer Collapse." You don't think there's any sign, at least, or you don't see that likely at all, at least at this stage?
No. Frankly, the bears have been waiting for a recession and a consumer collapse and an earnings collapse for, at least a year here, and it hasn't happened. And that's why markets are sort of where they are. I absolutely see a slowdown. I think that's inevitable with rates at 5%, potentially going a little bit higher and potentially staying up there, for a while. But again, I think the consumer is maybe incrementally getting, a little bit stronger in some ways right now, with wages rising above inflation and unemployment still at record lows. So that's definitely going to ease. The consumer will pull back a little bit, but I think those looking for a sort of consumer Armageddon here are going to continue to be very disappointed.
Well, Americans like their shopping. So Prime Day, we know, you mentioned obviously, but we also know it's next week. So what are you looking for from shoppers? I mean, last year were very solid numbers, and I know this year they're also doing some kind of invite only, I guess, to stoke demand. What are you expecting from Prime Day this year?
So this is basically the biggest shopping day of the year, or one of the top three. I think we're looking for something like 13 billion of sales. When you add in, about half of that, or a little over half of that, is Amazon, and the rest is, the sort of Targets and Walmarts of the world that are going to sort of piggyback on the back of that. Those will be very solid numbers. I think they'll be up on last year. And again, I think we're going to be, looking through the weeds a little bit just to see where is that relative demand. As I say, online, apparel, consumer electronics been under a little bit of pressure as the consumer's been sort of focused more on, beach, going on holiday or using services and things like that. So I think it's going to be pretty solid, but, I'll be looking at some of those underlying trends as well.
All right, Ben Laidler, eToro Global Market Strategist. Thanks so much for joining us here this morning.